For almost 20 years, Assassin's Creed has taken players across some of the most famous periods in human history. Ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, Renaissance Italy, the Caribbean, Revolutionary France, Victorian London, and even Feudal Japan have all become settings for series. But Assassin's Creed didn't begin as the massive open-world RPG we know today. The original games focused much more heavily on stealth, parkour, assassination, and exploring detailed historical cities. What makes the franchise even more interesting is that its origins are completely different from what most people expect. Before Assassin's Creed became its own series, Ubisoft was working on an idea that was connected to another major franchise. That project eventually evolved into something much bigger. A game about assassins, secret organizations, historical conspiracies, and eternal conflict between freedom and control. And from that unexpected idea, Ubisoft created one of the biggest and most recognizable franchises in gaming history. The story of Assassin's Creed actually begins with another famous Ubisoft franchise, Prince of Persia. While working on a new Prince of Persia game, Ubisoft wanted to take the series in a completely different direction. The developers imagined a new type of adventure, where players would control a young assassin whose job was to protect the prince while moving through a dangerous historical world. The project eventually became known as Prince of Persia, Assassins. It featured ideas that would later become central to Assassin's Creed, including stealth, parkour, assassinations, and large environments that players could freely explore. But as development continued, the project became so different from the traditional Prince of Persia formula that Ubisoft realized it could work better as its own franchise. And that's how Assassin's Creed was born. What started as an experimental Prince of Persia project eventually became one of Ubisoft's biggest and most recognizable gaming franchises. When the first Assassin's Creed arrived in 2007, it immediately felt different from most open-world games of the time. Instead of simply walking through traditional levels, players could climb buildings, run across rooftops, jump between structures, hide inside crowds, climb towers, and explore entire cities from above. The game also recreated real historical locations, including Jerusalem, Acre, and Damascus, giving players a feeling of moving through living cities from the past. Assassin's Creed wasn't perfect. Its missions could become repetitive. The combat was relatively simple, and some activities felt similar after several hours. But the core idea was revolutionary. The environment wasn't just a background for the story. The buildings, rooftops, streets, towers, and crowds were all part of the gameplay. Assassin's Creed made the city itself one of the most important tools a player had. Then Ubisoft made a decision that would define the franchise for years to come. They introduced Ezio Auditore. Unlike Altair, Ezio wasn't already a legendary assassin. He started as a young nobleman whose life was destroyed by betrayal, loss, and revenge. Over 3 games, players watched him grow from an inexperienced young man into one of the most famous assassins in the entire series. Assassin's Creed 2 also improved almost everything from the first game. It added more weapons, better exploration, new activities, more detailed cities, and a much stronger story with memorable characters. Ezio's journey continued through Brotherhood and Revelations, giving players years to follow his character and development. For many fans, Assassin's Creed 2 wasn't simply an improvement over the original. It was a game that turned Assassin's Creed into a true gaming legend. But then Assassin's Creed did something almost nobody expected. Instead of focusing on European cities, Ubisoft sent players into the Caribbean and completely changed the scale of the game. Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag introduced Edward Kenway, a young pirate whose ambitions eventually bring him into the conflict between the Assassin Brotherhood and the Templars. But this time, assassinations weren't the only thing players had to think about. Ships became just as important as the cities. You could sail across a massive open ocean, attack enemy vessels, board ships, discover remote islands, search for buried treasure, hunt animals, dive underwater, and fight enormous naval battles. Your ship could also be upgraded with better weapons, stronger armor, and improved equipment. Ironically, some players who weren't even particularly interested in Assassin's Creed became huge fans of Black Flag, simply because of its pirate gameplay. It was still Assassin's Creed, with a familiar conspiracy and hidden war storyline. But it was also something completely different. For many players, Black Flag remains one of the greatest pirate games ever made. But after years of releasing Assassin's Creed games almost every year, the franchise started to show cracks. Assassin's Creed Unity arrived in 2014 with huge ambitions. Paris was enormous. The crowds were more detailed than ever, and the game pushed the series' parkour system and visuals further than previous entries. But the launch quickly became infamous for technical problems. Players encountered crashes, glitches, broken animations, characters getting stuck, and even faces that appeared distorted or completely missing. Some of the bugs became viral across the internet and overshadowed many of the game's ambitious features. Ubisoft eventually released multiple updates to improve the situation, and Unity became much more stable over time. But the damage had already been done. And Ubisoft was facing an even bigger problem. After years of yearly releases, players were beginning to feel that Assassin's Creed was becoming repetitive. The franchise needed a major change, and Ubisoft was about to completely redesign it. So, Ubisoft decided to do something drastic. Instead of continuing to release Assassin's Creed games almost every year, the company took a step back and completely redesigned the series. In 2017, Assassin's Creed Origins arrived and introduced a very different version of the franchise. Instead of the traditional action-adventure formula, Origins added much deeper RPG mechanics. Players had levels, experience points, skill trees, different weapons, loot with different statistics, and a completely redesigned combat system. The world was also much larger, with huge areas to explore and many optional activities. And then there was the setting. Origins took players to ancient Egypt during the final years of the Ptolemaic Kingdom, allowing them to explore cities, deserts, pyramids, temples, and the Nile. The game also introduced Bayek, a Medjay whose personal story connects to the origins of the Assassin Brotherhood. Origins wasn't simply another Assassin's Creed game. It was Ubisoft asking a very important question. What if Assassin's Creed became a full RPG? And the answer was enormous. Assassin's Creed Odyssey expanded the RPG formula even further, taking players across ancient Greece with a massive open world, dialogue choices, different outcomes, character progression, legendary equipment, and hundreds of hours of content. The game gave players far more freedom than the older entries and focused heavily on exploration and role-playing. Then came Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which moved the series into the Viking Age and allowed players to explore England, Norway, and a huge variety of settlements and landscapes. By this point, Assassin's Creed had changed dramatically. The games were no longer mainly about quietly following targets, climbing rooftops, and performing carefully planned assassinations. They had become enormous open-world RPGs filled with quests, loot, abilities, massive maps, and long storylines. Some players loved this transformation and enjoyed having so much freedom to explore. Others felt that the series was slowly losing the identity that made the original game special. And that debate would continue for years. And eventually, there was one setting fans have been asking for almost since the beginning: Japan. Assassin's Creed Shadows finally took the franchise to Feudal Japan, giving players a chance to explore castles, villages, mountains, forests, and cities during one of the most fascinating periods in Japanese history. The game also introduced two very different protagonists: Naoe, a shinobi focused on stealth, parkour, and silent assassinations, and Yasuke, a powerful warrior who relies on direct combat and heavy weapons. The contrast between them represents two different sides of Assassin's Creed: stealth movement and assassination on one side, open combat, strength, and powerful weapons on the other. After years of fan requests and speculation, Assassin's Creed finally reached Japan, turning one of the franchise's most anticipated settings into a playable world. And Assassin's Creed eventually became much bigger than just a series of video games. The franchise expanded into novels, comics, animated projects, merchandise, and even a Hollywood movie. Some of these projects were successful, while others received mixed reactions from fans and critics. The games themselves also changed dramatically over the years. We've gone from the focused stealth and parkour of the original Assassin's Creed to massive RPGs filled with huge maps, loot, dialogue choices, and hundreds of hours of content. Not every experiment worked, and not every game was loved. In fact, the series has changed so much that some longtime fans barely recognize the Assassin's Creed of today. But that's also what makes the franchise interesting. For almost 20 years, Ubisoft has repeatedly reinvented Assassin's Creed instead of simply making the same game forever. From a Prince of Persia experiment to one of the biggest franchises in gaming, Assassin's Creed has come an incredibly long way. We've climbed Renaissance towers with Ezio, explored revolutionary Paris with Arno, sailed across the Caribbean with Edward, discovered ancient Egypt with Bayek, explored ancient Greece with Cassandra, fought through Viking England with Eivor, and finally reached Feudal Japan with Naoe and Yasuke. Over almost 20 years, the series has constantly changed. We've seen stealth-focused adventures become massive open-world RPGs, while the historical settings have taken us across some of the most fascinating periods in human history. Sometimes these changes worked brilliantly. Sometimes they divided the fan base. But Ubisoft kept reinventing Assassin's Creed instead of simply making the same game forever. And maybe that's the real reason the franchise has survived for so long. The games change. The characters change. The worlds change. But the idea remains the same. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more gaming stories and facts.